Now, let's go to the Liberal Senator, Coalition Senator Jim Molan. Now, he joins me live from Canberra. Thanks for joining us, Jim. I want to talk to you about bushfires in a moment because I know you've been out fighting bushfires in recent weeks. But what's the latest on that fire burning in the Namadgi Conservation Park south of Canberra? The ACT is at emergency warning. What's the latest on that bushfire?
Chris, good afternoon to you. The latest that I've seen on the bushfires is that it is going in a direction which, from my observation, is southeast from where it was yesterday. I spent most of yesterday in a truck watching the fire bombers as part of about a 17 or 18 vehicle group, watching the fire bombers hit it on the backside of Mount Tennant. Today it's sparked up badly, as everyone thought it would with the heat. And my house is at a place called Royalla, which is, I think, a good deal to a bit to the north of that. And to get to us, it's got to go through it's got to come down from the hills. It's got to go through the Murrumbidgee and cross the highway. But I know that a number of people in various places have been door knocked to pull out. I think if people who might be watching this in Canberra want an accurate thing, they must go on to the ACT RFS or the New South Wales RFS websites, and they should tune into the radio and the TV for more accurate assessments. My wife is at our place, and we're getting leaves that are burnt, but they're cold leaves at the moment. I believe it is spotting in other places though.
Jim, of course, you're a former soldier. Pretty disappointing that the ADF accidentally started this fire.
Yeah, I think it is. It is disappointing that happened because it detracts from the enormous contribution that has been that the ADF has made to all the fires over the last month or so. But you live and learn, and I'm quite sure the ADF won't use their landing light in situations of long grass again. But that's the way it's gone, Chris, and well, look, we've got to live with that.
That's the point. When it comes to bushfires, it's about the conditions. We can argue about arson and accidental lighting of fires by humans, and then there's lightning strikes. There's always going to be a source of ignition. The key question is how we control fires when they are ignited and how we manage those things we can manage. Now, you've been out on the fire front, as I said. There's been a lot of hyperventilated coverage about this, saying it's the worst bushfire season ever. It looks like it has been, certainly in New South Wales, but not across the country. What are your observations about what you've seen here? How bad has it been?
I think for the length of time that this has been running, since September, we've been fighting fires from southern Queensland and across the border since September of last year. From the simultaneous fires that have arisen in a number of areas, particularly before Christmas and then on New Year's Eve, and also for the ferocity in certain areas, I'm prepared to say, and I've spoken about this with Shane Fitzsimmons, I'm prepared to accept that there are elements that have been unprecedented. But the point that I make all the time, Chris, is that if these fires are unprecedented, it doesn't mean we weren't prepared. And when I look back on these fires and I see the heartbreak and the tragedy and the loss that occurred in this, and which we are only now starting to try to overcome in the recovery phase, when I look back on this, I see what is probably the greatest victory by our firefighting forces in relation to a fire. We'll never get rid of fires, but we've had the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, backed up by foreigners, backed up by the ACT, RFS and others, who have done enormous work in minimising the impact. We've learnt from 2009, Chris, and that major lesson was get people out of the way. And we've done that well. Now, at the tactical level, at the bottom level, people will whinge and complain, and they'll have grounds to. But at the strategic firefighting level, the top level, we've done well.
Just on this thing about unprecedented, of course, the individual elements of the fire are unprecedented. There was a day early on when New South Wales had more emergency level fires than ever before. I think overall it's probably, it looks like being the record or the worst fire season in New South Wales on record. But There's absolutely no criteria on which this is the worst bushfire season in Australia thus far, we all hope. Yet there's been such a desperate attempt to say it's the worst fires we've ever seen before, to say they're worse than we've ever encountered before, and it's been driven by what I've seen as a very opportunistic use of the bushfire tragedy to push climate change policies.
Yeah, I think both words, unprecedented, which is why I always define it down into something, and the climate change issue itself have been so politicised that at the moment, when what we've got to do at the moment is put the fires out, we've got to start the recovery and get it going, and we've got to minimise future fires. There's the strategy for you. The use of those two highly politicised terms will not contribute to getting those fires out, getting the money to the people and minimising future fires, in particularly the next fire season. So I stay away from them. I'm a practical person.
Well, but speaking of a practical person,
and I try and work.
Well, that's what's frustrating about this, annoying about this, is just the futility of it, because we know that our climate change policies are not going to make our bushfire seasons any better. Even if we think because of climate science we're exposing ourselves to even more bad fire days in the future, our climate policies are not going to affect that. We've got to deal with those things we can control now, next year and the next few decades. Absolutely correct.
And you know, I'm happy for people to say that the temperature and other supposedly climate change issues have had an impact on this. One of the many things have had an impact on it. But I wonder if they've had as much of an impact as the fuel loads. I mean, I heard someone the other day saying that some of the areas that have been burned have had 70 tonnes per hectare of fuel load. Now, I would have been impressed had they said 1 tonne of fuel load. I've seen instances where because the tracks were overgrown and not maintained, we can't get vehicles into those areas. And there's a whole bunch of practical issues like this. I think it's an indulgence at this stage of where we are. It's an indulgence, a political indulgence, to get into this a discussion on climate change at this stage. Put it off. Let's, you know, I'm not going to get into it until we got the fires out, we've got the rebuilding starting, and we know what we're doing to minimise the fires next year.
Did Scott Morrison do the wrong thing, taking his family on an overseas holiday at the start of this fire tragedy?
Well, at the time that he took it, and he's spoken about this quite openly, at the time that he took it, the responsibility for fires was totally and absolutely in the hands of the New South Wales government. And I'm only talking about I'm only focusing on New South Wales. He's made the public statement that he would do things differently in the past. But I tell you what, and what I've seen, and I'm a humble backbencher, as you know, Chris, what I've seen is that this government is focusing not on what's happened back there. Rake over the coals by all means, let's have inquiries. We're focusing on the next 10 years, and we're focusing practically and reasonably on the next 10 years, but we're getting the money out. But so the rebuilding's going on, etc.
Hasn't Scott Morrison overreacted, though, to this criticism, because he's now put himself as Prime Minister as almost the fire manager-in-chief across the states, and he's locking that in permanently with a federal role now in overseeing the states when it comes to fuel reduction. I mean, again and again, we're seeing Canberra marching in where the states ought to accept responsibility and actually get things done properly.
Yes, but I think there's got to be an overall coordinating role, and I think that that's where it's changed. Not only can we coordinate between states, because we have resources we can bring to this struggle, but also there is an expectation amongst the Australian population that we do it. And I see no indication at all that we're going to take over firefighting. Absolutely none. But we do have resources of the Australian Defence Force plus money that we can bring into this, and we'll do it. And I'm quite sure we'll let the boss come out and decide what the detail is of his proposal. But I can't see us changing the Constitution at this stage. Let's get the fires out, get the recovery going, and minimise the fires for next year.
Jim Molan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you.